Op Amp here. What I have for you today is sort of a cheap and easy method of adding some grip to your picks. I have an assortment of picks here, and just to show you some styles of purchased handles, grips, I guess you would say. This is a dipped Sparrows, and very nice, hard but not too hard on the fingers. But you can plastic dip picks, but the feel sometimes is a little squishy, and I just don't like the feedback. It also smells. You have to have an area with ventilation to do it. And then I have sort of a cover that comes with the Southord picks, and my only sort of gripe with that is it's very squishy. Really deadens that feedback. If you're going to be bullying locks all day, great, but for anything really delicate, it's just not the material for me. So what I've come up with is covering my picks with heat shrink, which is definitely not a new technique, but what I added to it, and what a few people asked me about, are these little ridges. Hopefully you can make that out. And it's really simple. It's actually more heat shrink. And there's two different techniques. This is an outer layer of marine heat shrink, which is a little bit thicker, harder, and it has adhesive. So it really stays put. And under it are little rings of just regular, electronics heat shrink. And gives what I feel is a nice compromise of thickness. I can still fit this in like a case, very easily if you have like a tuxedo case or something you want to take with you. Yet it gives you some comfort, and I can really pick all day. And the little grip really gives you, if you're gonna have a Bogota or something and you're really raking with it, gives you a lot of grip and holding power. The other option is to use little rings of marine for the inner grip as well, and that just gives it, you can see, a little more thickness. So for those people who want a little more heft, that's also an option. I don't have it with me right now, but I've also done for dimple picks, putting popsicle stick on each side, super glue or epoxy, and then the marine heat shrink, and just sort of before doing that contour it, and that gives you a really nice rounded surface to roll that dimple pick around with. So I'm going to get set up here. I just wanted to show you quickly the difference between the marine heat shrink and standard heat shrink. In my left hand here is standard heat shrink. You can see much thinner, compresses very easily, and this is the marine heat shrink. It doesn't shrink as much, but it's a thicker wall and it's really tough, and that really gives some good feedback, some durability, and like I said, adds a little extra thickness. So I'm going to get started here. First step, I'm going to use some standard heat shrink. This is 1/4 inch, but you can get whatever size you like. They sell it in big rolls online for fairly cheap. I think I got something like an 8-foot roll for $2 or $3. The marine stuff is a little more expensive. You can either get it in cut lengths like this is. I picked this up at my local Harbor Freight, or you can also order that online. I think also very much worth it. So I'm going to cut just a few little rings here, and that's going to be for my grips. And you can make these any size you want. They can be consistent or not consistent. Does not really make a difference. I'm going to take my pick here. This is a pick that I've been modified the tip for slider locks, and for a little project I'm working on. And I'm simply going to take those rings, slide them all on here, And now I'm just going to distribute them sort of evenly. Usually I find just the finger portion is sufficient. And now I'm going to be using a electronics reflow hot air gun, just because that's one of my other hobbies. But if you have just a regular hot air gun or even a lighter, you can shrink this down. So watch your ears for a moment, and I will shrink this. When I shrink, I like to approach it from the edge first. I find it tends to shrink a little bit more evenly on both sides, and you have the added benefit of the rings not getting blown around quite as much. So that metal's now fairly hot. I'm going to pause for a moment, let it cool down, and we'll go to the next step. So my pick is now cooled down. I now have the marine heat shrink, and I've just measured that out slightly longer than from the curve of the pick to the end. I did cut off a little piece that was extra. I can use that later for some more grip or whatever use I can find for it. And I'm just going to take the pick now and slide it right through there. If it's a little tight fitting, you might have to just squeeze to widen it up. And you'll see I've got that to focus, that I've come right up to where the curve is here. And I usually like to go a touch over because it's actually going to shrink back. So I'm going to take my hot air gun again, and the marine heat shrink takes a little more heat and a little more time to shrink. So just be patient, work it back and forth. I like to start from the end where my little rings are, because it's possible you could trap a little air in there and it'll be harder for it to really conform. So I'll start from one end and move down. Now that I've passed the rings, I'm still going to try to be pretty even, but it's not as critical. And you can already see that I've got my shape there. I'm just going to shrink down the end to the maximum that it will go. And I'm going to let this cool off again for a few minutes. And when I come back, I'm going to trim the end. And that's all there is. Okay, so my pick is cooled down enough that I can actually trim it. And I like to trim just shy of the end. You can see in one of the other picks I have here, I let it stick out a little bit. If it's a little rough, I'll hit it with a little sandpaper, but I find that fits very nicely in the hand. You can leave it longer if you'd like. It's really just up to personal preference. So I'm going to take my edge. I can see where my curve is, and I'm just going to take my craft knife and come right around, roll the pick around, and make sure you get that edge, and that way it'll be nice and clean when you pull it off. The last thing I like to do is hit it again, just for a moment with the heat, just to seal it. And I'll just get that a little bit warm, and mostly I'm trying to activate the glue. It's mostly been shrunk at this point, and we can get that just warm, and then a little press, and hopefully that will sort of just seal the end in there. And you can see I've got my nice little ridges here. Has a really nice amount of grip to it. Feels good in the hand, and for a matter of a few cents of material, you now have a really nice handle. This will still fit in your pick case. And like I said, you can adapt this technique to use other materials, other shapes. You can carve something and then cover it if you'd like. Pretty simple to do. So I hope that this has been a little instructional and a little helpful for you. Again, this is OpVamp. Thank you for watching.